Hi everyone, welcome back to Casual Watch Review channel. This week we're going to have another look at an Atowak watch, third one I've reviewed on the channel. They all come in this very unassuming black piano, black finished box, high quality box, not preparing you for usually what is quite a spectacular over the top watch inside. Although I will say that this version, the Tarantula, this is in a more traditional looking watch case, I would say, but nevertheless still has that awesome satellite hour or wandering hour complication on it as well. These are, of course, a subtle nod to other brands like Atowak, but with their own take. This is a really interesting watch, but most of all, I'm interested in what you guys think. So let's flip the camera around, do the review, and as always, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Wow, look at that. Here we have the Atowak Tarantula. This is the third Atowak that I've reviewed. I'm still not convinced about that name. They've had a couple of watches out now, so they're definitely sticking with the Atowak name. It's a Chinese-based company, but they're having a lot of fun with this Atowak style wandering hour hand, or satellite hour hand as they call it. This, I would say, out of the three that I've reviewed, is more of a traditional looking watch. The first two have been certainly statement pieces. They had their crown at the top, whereas this one has a crown at the 3 o'clock, as we would see on a normal watch. This one also uses a 22mm lug width, so you can swap the strap out for another one, which you couldn't do on the other two. You had to use the bands that came with it. But while we're talking about the band, I guess we're doing the review a little bit backwards here. While we're talking about the bands, it's again using that high quality NBR rubber. I'll put the full chemical name at the bottom here because I'm going to murder the pronunciation to this rubber that they're using, and I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of comments correcting me, so I'll just put the chemical name at the bottom here and you can decide how it's said. But what it is a extremely soft rubber. It still has some substance to it. It's not a cheap feeling soft rubber. Very nice on the wrist. There's some air vents at the side. The spare rubber band that it comes with also has their deployant on it, and I think they do a decent job of these deployants. It's not quite Omega quality, of course, but they do a decent job of these. The mechanism, very satisfying click. As you can see, it's nicely milled, the mechanism, and very easy to adjust. Moving the watch round to the front, and apologies, we're getting some crazy studio reflection in here. I've done my best to try and position the lights properly. I think it's due to just how domed the sapphire crystal is on here. It looks almost like a lens. They do say that this is a domed sapphire crystal and there is AR coating on it. It's not doing a great job in the studio, but I'll put in some outdoor shots and you'll see that the reflection when you're outdoors or you're just wearing it around is not as severe as it looks here. Reminds me very much of the difficult time I had filming the Christopher Ward Bel Canto. That had a much more extreme dome sapphire than this, made it difficult in the studio lighting nonetheless. So little apology there before we dive in. The watch case is a real highlight of this. It feels very solid on the wrist. It does have a nice little bit of weight to it as well on the wrist. You might think that this watch is lighter, but this is stainless steel, even though it does look like it's titanium, so there must be some DLC coating on it, although they don't specifically call that out on their website. The case measurements are a very wearable 49mm from lug to lug with a 42mm case, and unbelievably it's only 13.5mm thick. Now, to have this wandering hour complication, or I should say satellite hour is their name, so satellite hour complication, and also an automatic movement, and to still keep it to 13mm is quite a feat of engineering, I think, because there is a lot of visual depth when you look at the watch. How this works, if you're not familiar, if we pull out the crown here, the watch is currently at 10:15, so you look at the time here and then the pointer is pointing at the minutes, and as we move this round, so we're going to 10:30, 10:45, and then we're about to go to 11, now we're at 11:15, and so on. And if you watch at the top here, again, I'm going to try and avoid the reflection. As we come round, you'll see those revolving. So now we're at 12, and then we're going to come back round to 1. It's now revolved round to 1. We'll leave it at 1:15, and then we'll push it in. We'll set it at 115. You can see that the watch is moving because this star shape is attached to what would be the second hand. There isn't a dead on position, so you can set it dead on the seconds, even though that star does hack. And it hacks because even though we've got what looks like a very complex complication, they've built all of this, like the other two watches, on top of a Miyota movement. So they've used a top-end Miyota 9039 automatic movement. They've added their own rotor. There's some extra finishing to the movement itself, as we can see through the sapphire case back here. But they've created this complication on top of a Miyota movement, which I think is still impresses me. It impressed me the first watch that they sent me, and it impresses me even more on this one. This isn't an in-house movement. It's all built on top of a Miyota movement. As we concentrate now on the dial, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of visual depth to it. So you can see through the satellite hands, and then there's this web design. That is a separate piece. They've lasered that out, and it sits above the sub dial, or whatever the backing here is, the green backing. So that gives a lot of visual intrigue to the dial. I'm guessing that's the only bit that ties it into its name, the Tarantula. I think that is a bit of a webbing or a spider's web on there. There isn't much else tie-in, I don't think, to the Tarantula name, except I believe there's a small tarantula etching on the back, but other than that there's nothing else really ties it into the name. It's not like the Jacob & Co. spider watch where they had an animatronic spider on the dial. This one is a much more subtle version and won't set off any of the arachnophobes that are watching this. The case is a nice combination of brushing and polishing, and this has been done to a high standard because the brushing on the outer of the case appears as if it's sunburst from the center, so it's a radial brushing from the center. A nice visual interest. The crown is a nice proportion, and it's a very smooth winding action, a lot to capture the light and capture the eye. This is a very wearable watch, even though it does look like a highly complicated, more of a novelty watch. This one in particular is very wearable. Here you can see it on my 7.2 inch wrist. Atowak very kindly sent me this in for review. These do retail on their website for $2,199. For a Miyota powered watch, I would say that is definitely the top end, but there's clearly a lot of additional machining and additional mechanics that go into this watch, but certainly not a quick purchase, an impulse purchase on their website, something you'd certainly have to think about, I would say. They do offer a 10% off coupon and a 30-day money-back return policy. It's a lot cheaper than if you were to go for an Urwerk watch that this is clearly a little nod to. This is probably one of the cheapest ways of getting into a watch with this satellite hour or wandering hour. I'm very interested, as always, to know what you guys think. As always, I appreciate the time that you've spent. If you've got to the end of this review, really appreciate it. And I'll see you next time on Casual Watch Reviews.